The rabbis teach in the Midrash, one of the famous teachings about why the Jewish people were merited to leave Egypt. We were slaves in Egypt for many, many years. The rabbis say that one of the reasons that we merited, that we were worthy of being redeemed from Egypt, is that we stayed connected to our language. And hopefully this class will inspire you to explore the vast richness that will be introduced during tonight's talk and the coming weeks. We'll just be tickling the surface. I once gave this as a 12-week class, and I told the class back then that it could have been 2 or 3 year course easily. Hebrew is referred to as Lashon HaKodesh, the holy tongue or the holy language. Holy means separate, different. And usually it is separate or different because it is elevated spiritually. The Sabbath, for example, is called holy because it's spiritually more elevated than the rest of the week. The Torah is holy. It's holier than, for example, the Globe and Mail. The Jewish people are referred to as a Goy Kadosh, as a holy nation. There is something spiritually special about us. God is obviously holy, much more different than anything else in the universe. In our prayers, we say that the angels who are holy say about God, He is holy, 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 Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. A simple example of how different Hebrew is and how different it is to, for example, study the Bible in Hebrew than in translation. I want to share with you a phrase from the book of Leviticus, from Vayikra. We'll just put it up for a moment here. The verse says, a very famous passage, Kedoshim Tihiyu, you shall be holy. Ki Kadosh Ani, for I am holy, or as I am holy. God is directing the Jewish people that we should attempt to try to live holy lives and to be holy just as God is holy. If you were reading the Bible in English, that's all you would get. What's amazing, what's interesting, what's fascinating is that in Hebrew, one of the letters, which is a vowel as well, is the Vav, which has an O on top of it, and the O sound could be made without the Vav. Both of these make the O sound. When it's written with the Vav, it's called malay, full. The vowel there is full because it has the letter Vav with it. Sometimes the vowel is written without the letter Vav, just a dot above the letter that it's supposed to correspond to, and that is called chaser. It's lacking. It's lacking. When we read the verse, Kedoshim Tiyu, Ki Kadosh Ani, we see something fascinating. When the Torah directs us to be holy, the word Kedoshim here is written chaser. It's lacking the Vav. When it speaks about as God is holy, there it has the Vav. It's the same word, Kadosh, Kadosh. One is written chaser without the Vav. One is written malay with the Vav. When it speaks about God's holiness, it's written malay, full. When it speaks about our holiness, or the potential for us to be holy, it's written chaser, it's lacking, it's diminished, because our holiness could never be the same as God's holiness. So this is a very innocent example, but in an English translation of the Bible or a French translation, you would never get this kind of richness that you have in Hebrew. Hopefully what we'll be able to do in the coming weeks is become a little bit more acquainted with some of the richness of the Hebrew language. It's estimated that today there are approximately, this is a big approximately, 3,000 to 7,000 living languages.
If you were quiet, his name would be Skobac.
I saw in some of the research I did estimates that take it up to about 10,000. But we could easily say that approximately 3,000 to 7,000 languages easily today in the world. That's not including dialects. They estimate that the dialects take the number much, much higher. One of the things that's true about virtually every other language in the world is that they are arbitrary or conventional. For example, we refer to the things that we sit on as a chair. And we might be sitting in front of a table. But why do we call this a chair and that a table? It could have easily been reversed. We could have called the table a chair and the chair a table, and it wouldn't really make that much difference because it's essentially a term that's conventional. One language that you could say is different is the language that we learn in chemistry. The chemistry language, the language of chemistry, here the symbols are not arbitrary. Here, the symbols that we use correspond intrinsically to that which they describe. So when we speak about H2O, it's not just some arbitrary way of speaking about water. It actually paints a picture of water. H2O paints a picture of what the water molecule looks like. The water molecule is made up of 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom. However, the word water is arbitrary. We could have called water orange juice. We could have called it something else, and it wouldn't make that much of a difference. But the language of chemistry is a language which is not arbitrary or conventional. There is a direct and exact correspondence between the symbols, the letters, if you will, of the chemical language and that which they describe. Certainly, the letters that are used in any language in the world today don't have any intrinsic meaning. There's no meaning to the letter R or to the letter V or to the letter W. These letters don't have meaning. They're usually symbols that represent a sound that we make when we speak the language. Hebrew is extraordinary because in Hebrew not only is every word profoundly significant in that the word is not arbitrary, the word actually has to be the word that it is, but in Hebrew all of the letters have profound spiritual significance. The very bold and daring claim that we make in Hebrew is that if we understand reality, if we really understand what reality is, and if we understand the Hebrew letters, if we know every letter and what every letter means on the deepest level, if you can do those two things, it's a big if. But if you know reality and you know the meaning of the Hebrew letters, you could write the lexicon of the Hebrew language. You'd be able to go out into the world and know what every single thing is called, what the word for it is. But again, that requires a very, very deep level of understanding of the letters and of reality. You'd have to know what the sun is. What is the sun? And if you knew what the sun was and you knew the letters of the Hebrew alphabet, you would know that's the Shemesh. You'd be able to actually write the lexicon by yourself. Now you may have noticed that the example I gave for the chemical language of water, you may notice or recognize that it has an interesting similarity to the Hebrew word for water. The Hebrew word for water is Mayim, Mem, Yud, Mem. The Hebrew word for water, Mayim, Mem, Yud, Mem. The similarity between the Hebrew word for water and the atomic symbol for water is that the structure of the Hebrew word resembles the structure of the water molecule. There are 2 hydrogens, 1 oxygen. In the word mayim, 2 mems and a yud. Now that might not quite knock your socks off. But I want to share with you the preface to a fascinating book that I acquired this year. It's written by an Israeli professor named Chaim Shor. The book is called Coincidences in the Bible and in Biblical Hebrew. It's a book of 288 pages, and here's what Professor Shor writes in the preface. This book is about coincidences in the Bible and in the biblical Hebrew language. The nature of these coincidences, what they are and what they are not, and the structure of this book will be expounded in the introductory chapter that follows the preface. For now, suffice it to say that the coincidences addressed here are those that I have become acquainted with from my long-standing familiarity with written Jewish sources, or coincidences that I have detected by personal observation over the many years since these coincidences first intrigued my curiosity. He writes, from a personal perspective, I was reluctant to author this book. I am a tenured professor in an engineering department at an Israeli university, and coincidences are outside the reach of my area of expertise. Furthermore, he says, writing about coincidences may not add points to my international academic standing. Yet, for quite a few years now, I have observed peculiar coincidences in the Bible and in biblical Hebrew that were indeed troubling. As these amazing coincidences grew in number over time, a growing sense of uneasiness left me sleepless at night. I felt that my integrity as an academic researcher, whose mission in life, as I perceive it, is to tell the truth, was starting to be undermined. I realized that the sheer number of these coincidences, 288 pages, had reached a critical mass where not making the coincidences public would compromise my personal ethical values. Furthermore, it would be incompatible with my values as a scientist and with the very scientific method which I have applied throughout my academic career as a researcher. So I decided to put these coincidences in writing. What I found incredible was that after 288 pages of amazing coincidences, he doesn't seem to yet get beyond the description of them as coincidences. You know, if I flip a coin 5 times in a row and I tell you it comes out heads, that might be possible. But if I flip the coin 500 times in a row and it comes out heads, you have a right to think that I'm using a double-headed coin. It's very, very difficult to imagine that you can have so many hundreds and thousands of profound coincidences. So let me just introduce you to just a few of them, just as an example for tonight. The first one is the Hebrew word maznayim. Maznayim is a scale, a balance, a scale. And what is incredible about this word is that somehow whoever invented the Hebrew language so many thousands of years ago was aware of the fact that the center of balance in our body is located in our ozen, in our ears. Right in the middle of the word mazayim, balance or scales, is the 3-letter Aleph, Zayin, Nun, Ozen, or here Oznayim, ears. I don't know exactly when scientists figured out that the center of balance in our body was located in our ears. I don't think it goes back more than 100 or so years. The next example is the Hebrew word herayon. Herayon, the Talmud points out, the Hebrew word for pregnancy, If you add up the letters, every letter in the Hebrew alphabet has a numerical value. The first letter, Hey, is 5, Resh is 200, Yud is 10, Vav is 6, Nun is 50, for 271. What is the connection between Herayon and pregnancy? The Talmud says that a normal 9-month pregnancy has 271 days. Pretty interesting coincidence. One of my students pointed out, interestingly, that the word Herayon begins with the letters Hey, Resh, Har, mountain, because the belly of the woman who's pregnant begins to resemble a little bit of a mountain. The next example is the word for dog. In the Bible, in Hebrew, Kelev. What's fascinating is that the Bible tells us that after Adam and Eve were created, after Adam was created, before Eve was created, God brought all of the animals to Adam, and Adam names all of the animals. Adam names each animal. And the Bible says whatever name that Adam gave the animal, that name is what the animal was. That name is what the animal was. We can assume that Adam, who was on the highest possible spiritual level, he was the first one off the assembly line. The rabbis speak about Adam as someone who was able to see from one end of the universe to the next. So he understood reality. He understood the Hebrew language. He was able to name the animals. I said before, if you know reality and you know the Hebrew letters, you can write the lexicon. Adam was able to name the animals. He didn't just guess and give names to the animals arbitrarily. He knew, based upon what the animal was, what the name of the animal had to be. An example here, the word for dog, Kelev. Kelev is a contraction, if you will, of the words kol lev, all heart. Throughout history, the dog has always been referred to as man's best friend, the most loyal, loving pet you can possibly have is the Kelev. The next word on the list is Adam, the biblical word for human being. What is it that makes the human being unique? What's the quality of the human being that makes us unique from all the other animals, aside from our intelligence and ability to speak? So we learn in biology class, at least I learned this when I was in biology class, what makes us unique is our opposable thumb, so that we're able to study Talmud. Now, some of our sages pointed out that if you look at the letters in the word Adam, Aleph, Daled, Mem, on your sheets here, I show you the letter that comes after each of these letters in the Hebrew alphabet. After the Aleph comes a Bet. After the Daled comes a Hey. After the Mem comes a Nun. Bet, Hey, Nun spells out Bohain. Bohain is the word for thumb. So there seems to be a connection on some level between Adam, the human being, and what makes the human being unique, his opposable thumb. We have in Hebrew 3 different words for clothing, for a garment. The word beged, the word levush, the word me'il. Is it just coincidental that we name our clothing these kind of words? So we're told in the Bible that we only had to wear clothing after we rebelled, we sinned against God in the Garden of Eden. We ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil that God told us not to eat from. Their eyes were opened, they realized they were naked, they went and hid, they had to make clothing for themselves. The clothing was a result of their rebellion. The word beged in Hebrew is the exact same Hebrew word as rebellion. A bogade is a rebel. A begidah is a rebellion. When they opened their eyes and they saw that they were naked, they were embarrassed. The Hebrew word levush, garment, is related to the Hebrew word busha, embarrassment. So our clothing is tied into, the words for clothing are tied into the whole reason we have to wear clothing in the first place. The word me'il, a cloak or a garment in Hebrew, related to the Hebrew word me'ilah, which means to take which does not belong to you, to inappropriately use something. Again, Rabbi Chaim Shor would say, is it a coincidence, or maybe something else is at work here? The Hebrew word yad is the word for hand. Yad is hand. I have the numbers here. Yud is 10, Daled is 4, for a total of 14. Why is the hand connected to the number 14? Well, if you count the joints on your hand, you'll see that each finger has 3 joints, except for the thumb, which has 2. So 4 times 3 is 12, and 2 for the thumb is 14. So the yad is the hand because the yad has the 14, which are the joints in our hand. The Hebrew word koach is the word for strength, for power. Interestingly, koach is chaf, chet, the letter for 20 and the number for 8. So koach is 28. If a hand is 14, if you're doing something with both your hands, it's with all of your strength. So 2 hands is koach, is 28. The Hebrew word for a friend is a yedid. A friend is a yedid because with a friend you go yad b'yad, hand in hand. So we have the yud, daled for yad, hand, yedid, a friend that goes yad b'yad, hand in hand. A few other examples. The Hebrew word bechor, bechor is firstborn. The letters in the word bechor, bet is the letter for 2, chaf is the letter for 20, resh is the number for 200. Why would it be appropriate to have the word firstborn written as bechor? Because in the Bible, the bechor gets a double inheritance. There's a certain doubleness about the firstborn, so bechor would be a very appropriate word. The Hebrew word for soul is neshama. Neshama is soul. Very closely related to the Hebrew word neshima, breath. Because our soul was put into us by God breathing into us. The rabbis actually explain the last verse in the book of Psalms, which says, Kol ha-neshama tehalel Yah, let every soul praise or thank God. The rabbis say, Al kol neshima v'neshima. For every single breath we take, we should acknowledge God. Every time we breathe, we should do a meditation that God is actually breathing us, that our breath comes from God, that's taking the soul and actually implanting it into our body. Interestingly, both these words, neshama and neshima, have the same letters as the Hebrew word shmona, for 8. Our mystical teachers tell us that the number 8 in the Hebrew language is the number of transcendence. The number 7 is the number that describes the completion of the physical world. There's 7 days of the week. There are 7 colors in the rainbow. 7 notes, at least in the Western musical system. But 7 throughout the Bible, there are always series of 7. 7 comes up all the time in the Bible as a number that completes a unit. But 8 in the Bible is always a number that goes beyond the natural. 8 goes to the level of the not physical but metaphysical, not natural but supernatural. So, for example, in the book of Psalms, we're told that in the Messianic age, we're going to play music on an instrument called the shminit, the 8-stringed instrument. Hanukkah is a holiday where every single aspect of Hanukkah is about the theme of transcendence, going beyond. Not staying on a simple level, going beyond to the next level. Circumcision's on the 8th day. In 7 days we're created as a normal human being. On the 8th day, lifted up a little bit. If you take the sign for infinity, it's an 8 that's twisted over on its side. So 8 is this number of transcendence, supernatural, beyond the physical. That's our soul. That's our neshama, which we are in touch with through our breath, through our neshima. And finally, one last example, and again, there could be hundreds tonight, but we'll end with this. The word olam. The word olam in Hebrew is the word for world. World is called olam. Why is the world called olam? Because it's related to the Hebrew word ne'elam, which means concealed. Why is it appropriate to refer to the world as a place of concealment? Because the creator of the world is not visible. We cannot see God. He's not visible. He's not self-evident. So the world created by God is a world where God himself is concealed within the world. Now, our mystical sources teach us that the world was created through the Hebrew letters. It's an incredible thing that the letters of the Hebrew alphabet were the instrument through which God created the world. We say in our morning prayers, Baruch Sha'amar V'haya Ha'olam, blessed is he who spoke and the world came into being. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avot says that the world was created with 10 utterances. And when you read the first chapter of Genesis, that's what it says. God said, let there be light. God said, Yehi or, let there be light. Vayehi or, and there was light. And what the mystical teachers are telling us is that it's not that you have God with an infinitely large set of vocal cords speaking very loudly and saying the words that you could hear audibly, let there be light. What the rabbis are saying is that every single letter in the word or, light, every letter contains profound spiritual significance. And when God says the word or, light, what it means is that God is projecting his will that is captured and reflected in the letters of the word light. When God wants to create light, God basically has to will it into creation. And the way the Bible teaches us about the way God projects his will is to say that God spoke the word or, light. But what the mystics teach us is that what it means is that the spiritual power that's concealed within these 3 letters, Aleph, Vav, Resh, that combination of letters in that order is what creates light. And in the same way that everything in the physical world that we see is composed of different arrangements of electrons and protons and neutrons, that God takes the building blocks of creation, which are the letters of the Hebrew alphabet, and the different permutations and the different combinations of the letters are responsible for every single thing in the world. It's interesting that throughout the world there is a universal word that's used when a magician materializes something out of nothing. If you ever watch a magician pull a rabbit out of a hat, what is the magic word that's said? Abracadabra, which comes from the Hebrew abera kedabera. Abera, I will create, kedabera, as I speak. I will create as I speak. Abera kedabera. That the creation was an act of God's speech reflected in the projection of these letters. The Maggid of Mezrich, the famous major student of the Baal Shem Tov, explained that the very first thing that God created were the Hebrew letters. If you look at the first sentence in the Bible, Bereshit bara Elokim, in the beginning, God created et hashamayim ve'et haaretz, the heavens and the earth. There's one word in this sentence which really is not necessary on an absolute terms. The word et in Hebrew does not actually mean anything. It's a grammatical term in Hebrew that precedes the direct object of a sentence. It could have said in this verse, Bereshit bara Elokim, in the beginning God created, Hashemayim, the heavens, v'haaretz, and the earth. The holy Maggid of Mezrich said, what was the first thing created? Bereshit bara Elokim, in the beginning God created, et, the first letter of the alphabet, and Taf, the last letter of the alphabet. The first thing that was created was the Hebrew alphabet. Everything from Aleph to Taf. And with these letters, the world is created. The Sefer Yetzirah, it's one of the oldest Kabbalistic books written, traditionally going back to Abraham, explains that if you look at the creation story, the first chapter of Genesis, where the world is being created, God's name appears 32 times. And the Sefer Yetzirah explains that God created the world with the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, plus the 10 sfirot, the 10 Kabbalistic powers or energy spheres that project God's energy through these letters. So the letters become the building blocks of creation. Every letter in Hebrew is called a teva. The letter is called a teva. Interestingly, the word teva has within it bet yud taf bayit, a building. That the letters, the tevot, were used to construct, to build this world. The Hebrew letter is also called an ot. An ot is also a word in Hebrew for the letter, but ot in Hebrew also means a sign or a symbol, meaning each letter is not just like a K or a T. Each letter is a symbol that represents very profound spiritual forces. A word in Hebrew is called a davar. The world is created by God saying words. God says, let there be light. So God projects these words, the world comes into being, and fascinating coincidence that in Hebrew the word davar doesn't just mean a word, davar also means a thing. Meaning in Hebrew we see here that the word is the thing. How does the thing come into existence? Through the word that God projects. And the Bible says that God's word still hangs in the atmosphere. That isn't just that God spoke a word in the creation story. God continues to project the spiritual forces that reflect His will. They still hang up in the world, because without that continual projection, the world would not continue to exist. Let's try to understand what these letters mean. Just as an introduction, an appetizer, we're going to study tonight the meaning of the letter Aleph, the first letter of the alphabet, but just as an example of how the letters actually give you meanings of words. Two letters we're going to look at. The letter Pei, the letter Resh. The letter Pei in Hebrew, related to the Hebrew word peh, mouth. You even see in the structure of the letter itself, there's an opening there. The letter has a mouth to it. The meaning of the letter Pei focuses on the concepts of opening, of mouth, of entrance, of connecting the inside of something to the outside of something. For example, the Hebrew word panim. Panim means the inside. What is the Hebrew word for face? Panim. Why is the face called panim? Because the face tells you what's going on inside. How do you know how a person feels? Not by looking at their elbow, not by looking at their feet. By looking at their face, the face reveals what's going on inside the person. So the panim is a reflection of the panim, of the inside. And it's the interface between the inside and the outside. That's the letter Pei. The Pei is a way of somehow accessing and penetrating what's inside. The letter Resh, from the word Rosh, Rosh is head. Rosh Hashanah, not simply the head of the year, Rosh in the sense of the headquarters of the year, the basic unit that the year begins with, the source of the year. Rosh Hashanah really is the headquarters, the source of everything else that will take place during the year. The Rosh is the head, the source, the basic unit, the internal reality, the internal unity. So when you have these two letters, you have a Pei and a Resh, what it's conveying is the idea of somehow breaking into an internal unity. The Resh is the source, a unity, a headquarters, and the Pei is sort of breaking up and breaking into an internal unity. Let's watch what happens. Hebrew words have three-letter roots. What I have done here is construct all the words in the Hebrew language that begin with the letters Pei, Resh, and then we've taken the third letter that will reflect a different spin on this theme of breaking into or breaking up an internal unity. Let's look at the words. Pei Resh Aleph. Pei Resh Aleph, sometimes when kids are in Hebrew school, the teacher might call them a Pera Adam, a wild person. The word Pera means totally out of control, not together, wild. So again, when something is controlled, it's a unit, it's compressed, it's neat, that's the internal unity. But the Pei breaks it up and smashes it, and now it's Pera, it's wild, it's out of control, it's untamed, it's not together. Pei Resh Daled, the next Pei Resh Daled, Lifrod in Hebrew. Lifrod means to separate. So you have something that's together, and Lifrod, you're going to separate. Pei Resh Hey in Hebrew is the word for to multiply. In the beginning of the Bible, pru or vu, be fruitful and multiply. So there's something which is a unit, and now it's going to break open. It's going to multiply, and it's not now together as one unit. Pei Resh Zayin. If you remember from the story of Purim, there were cities that were walled. If they were walled, they were contained. And there were the unwalled cities. They were uncontained. They could spread out all over the place. And Pei Resh Zayin is the word in Hebrew for an unwalled city. Pei Resh Chet, Lifroch, or Lifroach actually, in Hebrew means to blossom, to open up into many parts. So you have one thing, and now it makes many things. Pei Resh Tet, the Hebrew word prat, which is a detail. Interestingly, here is an example where the English word is the same as the Hebrew word. Pei Resh Tet is prat in Hebrew, and in English it's the word part. Prat, part, a detail, not the whole thing, a part of the thing. Pei Resh Chaf, lifroch, means to break something into pieces. So you have something, and now you're going to smash it into pieces. Lifrom, Pei Resh Mem in Hebrew, means to take a braided hairdo and to unbraid it, to unravel a hairdo. Pei Resh Samech in Hebrew, Lifros, means to make into little crumbs, prusot challah, prusot lechem, little pieces of bread. Pei Resh Ayin, I'm sorry, I mixed up two things. Pei Resh Mem is to unravel. Pei Resh Ayin in Hebrew is to uncover the hair. Lifroa means to uncover or to unravel the hair as well. Pei Resh Sadi in Hebrew. Lifrotz means to break something with force, to smash it open with great force. Pei Resh Kuf in Hebrew. A perek is a chapter. It's not the whole book, it's a part of the book. Or it's a joint. It's not the whole finger, it's a joint of the finger. So perek is a chapter, a portion, a joint. It's part of a larger whole. Pei resh resh, fascinating. Here, we're taking the action of breaking something up and we're actually compounding it. Lifror in Hebrew, you have the word pirurim, are not little pieces. Pirurim are tiny, tiny crumbs. Now you're really making something into teeny small parts. And finally, the root pei resh shin is a chapter, a parashah, not the whole book, a chapter of the book, a part of the book. Or lifrosh, lifaresh, to specify, so you're pointing out something specifically, it's a part of something. Or it could mean in Hebrew to spread out, or it could mean to separate. We say in the Talmud, al tifrosh minat tzibur, don't separate from the community. So here is an example where if you know the first two letters and what those letters mean, you see that it's a theme that carries out consistently through all of the words that you can make with those letters. And what we'd like to do is just introduce tonight the first letter of the alphabet, which is the letter Aleph. What I'm going to try to share with you is not just what the letter means, but how do we know it? How do we decipher the secrets that are embedded in any letter of the Hebrew alphabet? So the techniques that we use are the following. We always examine the name of a letter. Every letter has a name. Aleph is a word that we'll examine. Then there's the sound that the letter makes. The name of the letter, the sound the letter makes. Then there's a numerical equivalent. Every letter in the alphabet has a numerical equivalent. That number will be significant. Then we have the shape of the letter. The shape of the letter itself will be highly significant. Then we have something special called the code of first letters. One of the teachings of Rav Tzadok HaKohen of Lublin, famous Hasidic master who passed away in the year 1900, he taught famously that if you want to understand anything in the Bible, find the first place that it occurs. If you want to know what a kiss is, find the first kiss in the Bible. If you want to know the meaning of any word, find the first time the word appears. If you want to know the meaning of any letter, find the first time that that letter appears as the beginning of a word. And then we have initials. Sometimes the initials or the abbreviation of different words will be consistent, and it'll illustrate the meaning of a letter. We'll show what that means in a few minutes. And finally, miscellaneous. Some letters will have miscellaneous ways of decoding them. So let's go and examine the letter Aleph, the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. What does the name Aleph mean? Basically, Aleph is related to the Hebrew word aluf. If you go to Israel, the commander of a battalion in the army is called aluf. So aluf is the word in Hebrew for a leader, a commander, a general, a big shot, a macher. Aluf is a very important person. Also, la'alef in Hebrew means to teach. So the word Aleph doesn't only have a connotation of being a general or commander. Aleph has the connotation of learning and teaching. For example, if you go to Israel and you enter into a special program to learn Hebrew, what is that special program called? Ulpan. Ulpan from Aleph, to learn, to study, to teach. So we have a connection to the letter Aleph of a commander, of a teacher. Put those into your hard drive. Hold them for a few minutes. Then we have the sound of the letter Aleph. Now most of the Hebrew letters make a sound. The bet makes a b, and the gimel makes a g. What sound does the Aleph make? Absolutely no sound whatsoever. The Aleph is a silent letter. So the name is commander, teacher. The sound is silent. There's no sound. The number Aleph is the number 1. The number 1, numero uno. The shape of the letter. One of the things we're going to learn is that the Hebrew letters are all compounded by other letters. Almost every Hebrew letter is made up of other Hebrew letters. So for example, the Aleph is made up of a Yud, and a Vav. The Aleph is made up of 2 Yuds and a Vav. The Hebrew letter Yud is the letter that corresponds to the number 10. And the Vav is 6. So we have 10 and 6. 26. Is the number 26 significant in Hebrew? So if you're familiar with the special name of God, in the Bible there are many names for God, but there's one specific, ultimate name of God. Not more like nicknames, but God's specific name. It's the name that we as Jews don't pronounce. There's a religious sect of Christianity called the J Witnesses, and they try to pronounce it, although there's no letter J in Hebrew. Someone should tell them this. But this name of God is composed of 4 letters. Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey. Yud is 10, Hey is 5, Vav is 6, Hey is 5, for a grand total of 26. So God's absolute special name, Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey, which basically is a contraction of the words Haya, Hoveh, Yiyeh. Was, is, will be. God is eternal. And God's eternality is reflected in this special name, Yud, K, Vav, K. Equals 26, and the Aleph is reflective of that name, Yud, Yud, Vav, 26. Then we have something called the code of first letters. What is the first time the letter Aleph appears at the beginning of a word in the Bible? So if I flip back, we had a few moments ago the first verse in the Bible. The first verse read, Bereshit, in the beginning. Bara, created. Third word was Elohim. Elohim is one of the words for God. It begins with the letter Aleph. So the first time the letter Aleph appears in the Bible, the code of first letters, the first time the letter Aleph appears is at the beginning of the word Elohim, which is the name, one of the names of God. Then we have just one side point about the word Aleph. If you spell out the word Aleph, Aleph Lamed Pei, that's how you spell out Aleph. Aleph is 1, Lamed is 30, Pei is 80, for a grand total of 111. 111. Somehow there's a connection between Aleph and oneness. When I mentioned initials before, one of the things that's fascinating is that quite a few of the terms we use for God begin with the letter Aleph. For example, in a very famous story, God says to Moses, go to Pharaoh and tell Pharaoh, let my people go. And Moses freaks out, and Moses says, but wait a second. God told Moses to go to the Jewish people, right? And tell them that you're going to be freed from Egypt. That was the first message. Tell the Jewish people, you're getting out of here. We're going home. So Moses is being told by God, you're going to become a prophet and a leader for the Jewish people. Go down to the Jews, tell them you're leaving. And Moses says incredulously, but God, what if they ask me, now what do you think Moses is going to be asking? What if they ask how you're going to do it? What if you ask, we've been here for so many years, they're never going to let us go? Moses has a very strange question. Moses says to God, yeah, but what if they ask me your name? That's Moses' concern. Right? You're going to send me down to the Jewish people, and you're going to give me this mission to redeem them, but what if they ask me your name? In the Bible, a name always, again, captures the essence of something or someone. So when Moses says to God, what if they ask me your name? What he's really saying is, God, who are you? If they ask me, who are you? What do I tell them? Who is this God? And what was the answer God gives to Moses? God says to Moses, tell them that my name is Eheyeh, Asher Eheyeh, often mistranslated as I am that I am. But it actually means Eheyeh, I will be, Asher Eheyeh, what I will be. And that's my name, God says. Eheyeh sent you. I will be what I will be. What is God saying? God is saying to tell the Jewish people, you want to know who I am? He's saying, I will be what I will be, which means you have to experience me. Walk with me on the stage of history, and you'll come to understand me. I can't give you a description, but if you want to know who I am, God says, I will be what I will be. We will get to experience each other. You'll get to know me through history. These three words, Eheyeh, Asher, Eheyeh, Aleph, Eheyeh, Asher begins with an Aleph, Eheyeh, triple A, Aleph, Aleph, Aleph. So when we think about terms for God, we had Elohim, we have Eheyeh, Asher, Eheyeh, we have Adonai, one of the terms we use for God. Instead of saying that four-letter name of God, the tradition is to pronounce it as Adonai, begins with an Aleph, the Master. We refer to God sometimes, we had this on Passover, one of the songs at the end of the Seder, Adir Hu. We refer to God as Adir, mighty. We refer to God as Echad, the one, begins with an Aleph. We call God Adon Olam, the master of the universe. So many of the terms, I have it over here as initials, many of God's initials begin with the letter Aleph. And finally, we have other. Watch something fascinating. This is the first several verses in the Bible. One of the names of God, it's a name that our Rastafarian friends enjoy, is the name Yud-Hey, Yah. Yud-Hey is one of the names of God. Yud is 10, and Hey is 5. That's 15. We had another name of God, which was the Yud-Hey, Vav-Hey, the Tetragrammaton. That was 26. Another name of God is El, Aleph, Lamed, El. One of the names of God. Aleph is 1, Lamed is 30, 31. Another name of God is Elohim. The word Elohim adds up to 86 in Hebrew. So here we have 4 different names of God. Yah, 15. Yud-Kei, Vav-Kei, the 4-letter name of God, 26. El, 31. Elohim, 86. Watch what happens. We begin from the first letter of the Bible, from the first letter, Bereshit, and we count 15 letters. From Bereshit, 15 letters, we hit the letter Aleph. If you count 26 letters for the name Yud-Kei, Vav-Kei, the 26th letter is Aleph in Haaretz. If you count 31 letters, you get the Aleph in Vehaaretz. If you count 86 letters from Bereshit, you get the Aleph here in Elohim. Interesting that you take all these names of God, you take the numerical value, you count that number from the first letter of the Bible, you keep on hitting an Aleph. The letter for what? So what does the letter Aleph mean? Let's think about it for a second. Let's look at all the clues now. The name of Aleph is a commander, a chief, a teacher. It's a silent letter. There's something that's unpronounceable about it. The code of first letters takes you to the word Elohim, one of the names of God. The initials of many names of God begin with the letter Aleph. And we saw that when you start from the first letter of the Bible and you count the number of letters and different names of God, it takes you to the letter Aleph. If it smells like a duck and it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. And if all of these clues are telling us that there's something divine about the letter Aleph, that somehow the letter Aleph is a letter in the Hebrew alphabet which reflects godliness, reflects God, reflects divinity. So if we want to understand what Aleph is all about, we have to think that it's connecting us to God. Now, one thing that's worth asking is this information useful? Is it helpful to know this kind of information? As students of the Bible, we'll find something interesting. When you read through the Bible in Hebrew, you'll often find anomalies. You'll often find that there are words that you might have one letter written very, very big. You might have a letter written very, very small. And it's meaningful to ask why. Why is the word written differently here, where the letter in this word is written huge or tiny? Sometimes words seem to be misspelled. There are words sometimes that seem to be spelled incorrectly. Let's look at a few examples. When the Bible speaks about the laws of kashrut, of the dietary laws, one of the passages says, "V'lo titamu bahem," do not become impurified through them, "v'nitmetem bam," and you'll become impure through them. The Hebrew word for impure is tameh. Tet mem aleph. Tet mem aleph is tameh, impure. So the Bible tells us, do not become contaminated through these foods. Because if you eat them, the Bible tells us, v'nitmetem bam, you'll become contaminated through them. What's peculiar is that this word tameh here should have been spelt tet mem aleph. There's an aleph that's missing. There's an aleph missing from the word nitmetem. Why is that? So now we understand why. When you violate this law and you eat foods that you're not supposed to eat, you become disconnected from the aleph. That somehow the aleph is now a little bit removed from your world. So it's not just an accident that this letter is missing from this word. There's something that the Bible is teaching us, that when we do certain things, we disconnect ourselves from the aleph. The aleph itself gets removed from the word. Similarly, the Bible speaks about a sacrifice that's brought for idolatry, for worshiping idols. The Bible says, "V'se'ir izim echad lechatat." The word chet in Hebrew, a chet is a sin. Chet is to pulverize. A sin pulverizes the aleph. It destroys the aleph. So when we worship idols, again, the letter aleph is missing from the word chet here, because idolatry separates us, distances us from God. Let's go a little bit deeper. We learned before that the biblical word for man, for human being, is Adam. Now you're going to have to strap your seatbelts on. The biblical word for human being is Adam. Aleph, Daled, Mem. We know now that the letter Aleph symbolizes godliness. Let's say spirituality, if you will. The human being is composed of two parts. The human being has a divine part, an Aleph, and then the letters Daled and Mem, Dam, which spells blood. So there's two aspects to the human being. There's our physical aspect, which is referred to as the Dam. Throughout the Bible, by the way, the Dam represents the life force of any animal, any living creature. So the Dam captures the living, let's say, terrestrial, physical part of the human being. And then there's the godly part. So the human being is composed of these two parts. In the same way, we're told that the Bible says God took the dust of the earth and formed it into a human being. That's the physical part. And then God breathes the breath of life into that and gives it a soul. That's the spiritual part. The Talmud says that there are three partners in the creation of every human being. There's the mommy, the daddy, and God. Three partners in the creation of every human being. The father is called Av in Hebrew. Av is father. Mother or mommy is Aim. Av, father, Aim, mom. The letters Aleph and Bet for father are the letters for 1 and 2. So Av is 1 and 2. Aim is Aleph and Mem, 1 and 40. So the number for the father is 1 and 2, which is 3. The number for the mother is 40 and 1, which is 41. 41 plus 3 is 44. So the Dalet and the Mem, this part here is 40 and 4. This physical part of the human being, the Dam. By the way, why is Dam? Think about it for a minute. The word Dam, blood, is the number 4 and the number 40. Somehow this fourness adheres to the word for blood. What is the connection between blood and the number 4? There are 4 types of blood, 4 varieties of blood that exist, at least for the human beings that I know of. So we have this word Dam, blood, which is 44, corresponds to the physical part of who we are. And it's the equivalent of Aim, 41, and Av, 3, 44. So we have 44 corresponding to the physical part of the human being. Why are we called Adam? Why is the human being called Adam? So we're told in the Bible it's because we come from the Adamah. Adamah is the earth. So the human being is called Adam. Adam, because we come from the Adamah. Why are we called Adam, and why is that word Adamah so significant and so relevant? Because what is the earth? The Maharal from Prague explains the earth is pure potential. When you have a piece of land, what will it grow? Will it be productive? Will it just be gathering nothingness? Will nothing happen there? So if you take care of it, and you plow it, and you clear it, and you fertilize it, and you plant, and you water, and you take care of it, and you work it properly, it can actually be very productive. Look what happened. The Jewish people come back to a land that's full of deserts, and it's growing all over the place. And yet there are people that have a yard, a field, which nothing happens. So the same way that land, earth, is pure potential, it depends upon what you do with it, the human being in the same way. God created cats and giraffes and monkeys. Everything that God created was created perfect. Giraffes don't become more of a giraffe as they get older. Cats don't grow in their catness or their cat kite. And that's why after everything that was created, God said in the creation story, Ki Tov, God saw that it was good. God created every single day, and God saw that it was good. God saw that it was good. When it comes to the human being, the Bible never says, and God saw that it was good. Why? It depends. What are we going to do with our raw ingredients? God gave us a body and a soul, but what we become is a function of what we do with those raw ingredients. So we are called Adam because we come from the Adamah, and we're pure potential. Potential for what? So the word Adamah can be read in Hebrew as the word Adameh. Adameh, I can resemble. I can be like. Who can I be like? So we know, as we learned earlier tonight, that God says, Kedoshim tiyu ki kadosh ani, you shall be holy as I am holy. The Bible's main directive to human beings is we should try to become more like God, more godly. And so if you take the word for God we learned before, that special 4-letter word for God, Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey, and you spell it out, spell out the word letter Yud, and Hey, and Vav, and Hey. It's on your sheets. You spell out those letters. This is called in Hebrew milui. You're taking not just the letter, but you're spelling out the letter. And if you add up all of the letters in the name of God, Yud is 10 and 6 and 4, which is 20. Hey and Aleph is 6. Vav Aleph Vav is 13, and Hey Aleph is 6, for a total of 45. The name of God equals 45. What is the value of Adam? Adam is the 44 plus the Aleph, 45. The human being is 45, and we can resemble, we can be like God, which is 45. I want to share with you an incredible teaching. There is a Kabbalistic theory which says that every single verse in the Bible corresponds to a year in history. Every verse in the Bible corresponds to a year in history. So the first verse in the Bible corresponds to year number 1. Verse number 1000 corresponds to year 1000. Verse 5000 corresponds to year 5000. Up on the board here, we have verse number 5708. Now, to save you some time, rather than counting verse after verse after verse, if you get certain editions of the Hebrew Bible, they tell you after each of the 5 books of Moses how many verses are in each of the books, and then after each portion how many verses are in that portion. So with a little bit of a calculator, it wouldn't take you that long to reach 5708. This is verse 5708. Now, today we're in the Hebrew year 5771. This is the Hebrew year 5771. So if 5771 is the year 2011, what was the English year for 5708? And the answer is the English year 1948. What does the Bible tell us about the year 1948? This is not the verse, I'm sorry. It's this verse over here. The Bible says, this is Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 3. This is verse 5708 in the Bible. V'shav Hashem Elokecha et shvutcha. The Lord your God will return your remnant, v'richamecha, and He will have compassion on you. V'shav v'kibetzcha, and He will return and gather you. Mikol, from all. Ha'amim, the nations. Asher hefitzcha Hashem Elokecha shama, where the Lord your God scattered you there. Here we have a verse in the Bible corresponding to the year 1948, which describes God gathering the Jewish people back to their land after they've been scattered throughout the world. In the coming weeks, I will show you incredible connections to this year 1948. I want to end tonight on one other year. This is a verse in the Bible that we're actually going to read this Shabbat. This Shabbat will be Parshat Bahar. And at the end of the first Aliyah, the Torah says, Bishnat Hayovel Hazot, in this year of the Jubilee, Bishnat Hayovel Hazot, in this year of the Jubilee, Tashuvu ish el achuzato, people will return to their possession. We know that in the Jubilee year, every 50 years, the land was supposed to revert to their original owners. And if you had to sell your land for whatever reasons, it came back to the original owners after 50 years of the Jubilee. There are 2 things that the rabbis notice that are strange about this verse. First thing that's strange is, why does it say in this year of the Jubilee? What it should say is, in the Jubilee year, the land goes back to its owners. It should just say, Bishnat Hayovel, in the year of the Jubilee, Tashuvu ish el achuzato, people return to their possessions. Why does it say specifically in this year of the Jubilee, as if it's speaking about a particular year? Second question is, the word tashuvu here is written unusually. Usually the word shuv, to return in Hebrew, is written with a vav here. Shuv, the vav with a dot on the side, is the u sound. And here the u sound is made with 3 diagonal dots going down. So 2 problems with this verse. Why does it have this word this year? And why is the word tashuvu spelt strangely? Let's take this word. Tashuvu is the Hebrew number 708. It's the Hebrew number 708. Now, when you write the year in the Hebrew calendar, there's no number for the 1000th place. This year, for example, is Taf Shin Ayin Aleph. 771. But how do we know that it's 5,771 this year and not 3,771? So in the same way, you'd write for the year 1948, you write 48. We know which millennium we're living in. So this could be the Hebrew year 708, 1708, 2708, 3708, 4708, or 5708. There are several clues, which I can't go into now, that tell us it's talking about the 6th millennium. So the rabbis teach us that this is referring to the year 5708. 5708, which we saw before was the year 1948. Now watch what happens with the verse. Bishnat Hayovel Hazot, in this year of the Jubilee, Tashuvu Ish El Achuzato, the people will return to their possession. In the year 1948, we will return to our land. But I mentioned earlier on tonight that when a word is spelt without the vav, we had the Kedoshim with the vav and without the vav. With the vav, it was malay. Without the vav, it's called chaser. It's lacking. It's missing. So this verse is spelled tashuvu without the vav. This word 1948 is chaser vav. It's missing 6. We came back to Israel in 1948 and we were missing 6 million of our brothers and sisters. The Bible has unbelievable cues pointing to this year 1948.